What up, Wizards? It's Deb from The Place, and it's a big old day. Edge of Eternities gave us 25 new cards to look at today, which is kind of a lot, and only 3 of them are commons, so a lot of exciting uncommons and a few rares everyone's going to be talking about, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I guess I want to start the day by acknowledging the much-needed, very necessary reprint of Virus Beetle. I know we all popped for this one when we saw it, right? Hey, it's Virus Beetle. We last saw this guy in Standard in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and it's been like a whole year since that set rotated out, so I'm sure we're all very happy to get Virus Beetle back. I kid a little bit. It's just a burglar rat that's also an artifact, but I saw this guy pop up on the arena like more than you might think, so maybe that'll happen again. I don't know. Good to have you back, bud. But as far as new commons, we got to see a couple of those today at least. There's Fungal Colossus and Sammy's Curiosity. I think you could make an argument for both of these cards, right? Fungal Colossus, this is 7 mana sort of. 6 and a green for a 5/5 fungus beast. It costs X less to cast, X being the number of differently named lands you control. So I guess in Standard, if you have 4 differently named lands, which is pretty easy, then suddenly it costs 3 mana to cast, and you got 5/5. It's just a vanilla 5/5, so like, how good is that really? Right? But still, I guess you could get this down to costing a single green mana, like, pretty easily. It'd be like fairly late into the game, but of course, if you have 6 differently named lands, boom, 1 mana 5/5. That might be worth it to you, right? So I don't know. It's a cool design. I will say in pre-release, it looks kind of weird because like most of your lands are probably going to be basics. So it's still going to be like a turn 6 huge guy. And I guess that's okay in pre-release. He's going to be a huge guy no matter when you get to play him, but I don't know. Beware is all I'm saying, but I don't know, I think he's a cool little dude. I like the design on this, but Sammy's Curiosity might actually be kind of a decent magic card. This is a single green mana for a sorcery. You gain 2 life and create a lander token. I'm into it a little bit, you know, if you need the lander tokens, I guess. It kind of sucks at its sorcery speed this time around. I've said that certain removal spells are sorcery speed, and I like that this season. I've saw that I've confused a couple people in the comments section. I like to play fair magic kind of way. I like that certain like low cost removal spells are sorcery speed. Like, yeah, they're really efficient to cast them. You can kill 3 drops with them even, but you got to spend the mana on your turn. I think that's balanced, right? As far as a card like this goes, I think it'd be like much better at instant speed in a way that wouldn't be like super broken. So I would like it more in that case, but I'll still take a lander token for a single green mana and a couple of life while I'm at it. Like, sure, why not? I think there's probably better ways of spending a single green mana in Standard right now, but this thing's fine, I guess. But let's get into these uncommons, y'all. There's more of these than anything else today, but you know, sometimes uncommons can be like the most important cards in Standard. It happens all the time, so let's get through these, because some of these ones at the end are pretty good looking, but we'll start with stuff like Mono Circuit Feeder. It's probably not a Standard all-star, but decent limited guy, right? 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 4/4 artifact Nautilus with flying. Nice. When this creature enters, until end of turn, target creature you control gets plus X plus 0, and target creature an opponent controls gets -0/-X, where X is the number of artifacts that you control. Now, I guess if he's the only artifact when you play him, then like one of your guys gets a little bit of boost, maybe you take out an X one, it could work, but in limited with all these lander tokens, and with all the other artifact creatures running around, that's why we got the Virus Beetle reprint right there, right? Like, maybe it'll be a little bit easier to make that number 3 or something, and I think once you push it to 2, 3, 4, then suddenly this guy means business, man. He's got a great ETB trigger. He takes out like a pretty chunky thing on the opponent's side, and he's making one of your dudes much chunkier. I mean, hate to use that word twice, I guess, but it works. But either way, it's not terrible, especially when you also get a 4/4 out of the deal. So I kind of like the guy in pre-release. But we'll move on to stuff like Remnant Elemental and Specimen Freighter. Now, Remnant Elemental is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 0/4 elemental with reach and landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this creature gets +2 +0 until end of turn. This might be a little bit better than I'm judging it, but I really don't like the 0 power to start things off, you know. Cards like Echoum Hellhound were pretty cool because they were really, really efficient. This guy costs twice as much as an Echoum Hellhound to play, so that turn matters an awful lot in Standard. He won't get attacking till turn 3, and then maybe he's a 4 power attacker, but you probably spent your entire turn and all your mana, you know, making sure this guy attacks for a beefy power. So from chunky to beefy, these are not attractive words, but either way, it's probably easy to make this guy a big dude, but it also takes like a lot of time and resources and stuff, so I'm just not sure if easy is quite the right word. That's all I'm saying. What else could you be doing? instead of this. So maybe in your red-green landfall deck you try this guy out, but I'm just not sure he's going to get the varsity helmet at the end of it. But I guess some people might argue that like a 2-mana 0/4 reach at least like blocks for the entire game, you know, and I guess it does do that. I can't take that point away from you. But let's look at Specimen Freighter here. 6 mana, 5 and a blue for a 4/7 spacecraft. When it enters, return up to 2 target non-spacecraft creatures to their owner's hand. It also has station, and if you station it at 9, it has flying, it becomes a creature, and it has whenever the spacecraft attacks. Defending player mills 4 cards. There's going to be people who are like kind of hype about that, and then other people who just like kind of roll their eyes. But still, I think that like stationing this to 9 is like kind of a lot just to get this ability. But like maybe a 4/7 flyer is good enough in pre-release, I'm specifically saying here, because 6 mana is a lot, but obviously the enter the battlefield trigger is pretty good, you know, like even again, like you go pre-release and suddenly this returns like the 2 most expensive things to your opponent's hand and they have to like spend 2 turns replaying them and suddenly you're getting ahead. Maybe that gives you enough time. Right, that's one thing I guess unique to this card that not all the station cards have going for them, is that this takes 2 things off your opponent's side of the board, so like maybe it's a little easier to justify tapping your guys down, right? So you're not just like tapping blockers down. So like maybe there's that, but I have said before already this previous season that I don't really love 7 and 8 drops and stuff in pre-releases, but I'll play like 2 6 drops. I don't care. And so like I think this guy might be a pretty decent 6 drop, but Station 9 is a beating. That's too high. Well, let's keep going and look at Rescue Skiff as well as Roving Actuator here. Now Skiff is 6 mana, 5 and a white for a 5/6 spacecraft with 10 plus station. It becomes a creature and has flying. But when it enters, return target creature or enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Uh-oh, spooky. Is it going to replace, you know, Abuelo's Awakening or something in the Omniscience deck? No. Nah, there's already like better options than that for like 5 mana. And there's a hot debate, even after rotation, about like which of those cards is going to end up seeing play. So I just don't think that 6 mana is like really realistic in the Omniscience deck for sure. But I've seen a couple of people suggesting it on like Reddit today. I just don't think this is the option. But there is kind of a Vehicles Reanimator deck starting in Ether Drift. I think we got a bunch of cards for that. So like maybe this goes in there, give you some value, gets back a bomb enchantment or a creature. The thing is, this can't get back a vehicle or a spacecraft itself, which is kind of lame, but I guess this could provide some value. It's fun to blink and stuff. So like, again, this is one of those you play in pre-release because it could be a big flyer and another big flyer, right? All at the same time. So it's pretty fun. Now, Roving Actuator is a card I really want to like. This is 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 3/4 artifact robot with void. When it enters, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn or a spell was warped this turn, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. Copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So, kind of awesome, actually. 4 mana is probably too much for this, but it can at the very least recast your removal spell or your burn spell or something like that, and that's just like the bottom of the barrel as to what this can do, right? There's plenty of 1 and especially 2 drop instant and sorceries that actually have like real relevance on the game. They let you draw and discard cards and stuff like that. So I don't know, man. I think that this has like plenty to do. I just think there's much better 4-drop options for the most part in standard than this, but I say that not having quite reviewed all the different options for things it can recast. I think just recasting like a Duress out of the graveyard or a spell like it, right, a Cruel Claws Heist or something, is probably a pretty hype thing to do with this, just like any small instant or sorcery you can think of that is impactful, which is a lot of them, you know, like this is pretty good with. And I guess for a little extra tech, if you can void it, then, which by the way, it's not free. You have to have void for this, but still, if you can get this ability to pop off, well, then suddenly you definitely trigger all of those second spell you cast in a turn thing, right? So, you know, we just saw another card that works with that mechanic a couple of days ago, right? The thing that can give you like 2 1/1 tokens wants you to cast 2 spells in a turn. And there's a bunch of cards that aren't named Corey Steelcutter that also have that text. So it's kind of good with them because it more or less guarantees that you're able to do it. And on turns where you're able to, say, cast a removal spell, still fit mana for this guy, you basically get that same removal spell twice if it was 2 mana or less, right? Because once you've removed a creature from their side of the table, Void pops off. So, I don't know, man. There's a lot of cool things about this guy. He might just be, like, slightly priced out, though. But let's look at All Fate Stalker and All Fate Scroll here. Now, Stalker is one of these guys. He's 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 2/3 Drix Assassin. When he enters, exile up to one target non-assassin creature until this creature leaves the battlefield. You can also warp this for 1 and a white. So I like that you can target anything with this. That's pretty great. You can, when you warp it in the first place, you can target one of your creatures and get like another enter the battlefield trigger or something. As far as a blink effect goes, it is 2 mana at sorcery speed, but I've seen less efficient blink effects, in standard especially. So it's not a terrible blink effect if you want to repeat ETB triggers, but that's just on the warp. You just pay 2 mana to do, get Charming Prince's ETB again or something. But when you play it out of exile for the 4 mana, then you target one of your opponent's creatures, and that's actually pretty gross. That's not bad. You can target one of your opponent's creatures with the warp ability, and that effectively means it can't block that turn or something. And that's a way to use it. There's a lot of ways to use the card, so I think he's pretty cool. I don't think he's super standard playable, but the fact that he, pulls double duty, does a couple of things, get you tempo if you need it at the same time. Like, there's a lot of things I do like about this, but Bees is a 4-drop in white, right? Even like Dion from Final Fantasy is a 4-drop in white, and you just look at the difference in power level. So you have to be able to fit stuff like this, and I don't think we quite can in standard. But in limited, this is a pretty decent Magic card, especially with so many other warp creatures, because warp creatures tend to have enter the battlefield triggers. There's a ton of ETB triggers in this set, so if you want to target one of your own guys with the warp ability on this, you're almost sure to get another ETB trigger. So cool little guy here in limited. But All Fate Scroll is 3 mana for an artifact that taps for a mana of any color. Stop me if you've heard this one, but here's the extra icing. 7 mana, tap, sacrifice, draw X cards, where X is the number of differently named lands you control. Am I crazy, or is this card a bomb? Like, is this card really good? I think that sometimes, we've seen this somewhat recently in standard even, and for the last 5 years, if a 3 mana rock is good enough, it can see play. People play Ancient Cornucopia all the time on the arena, and even sometimes you see it pop up in MTGO leagues and challenges. Ancient Cornucopia is kind of a serious card, and there's been other cards like that in the past, so it's not like a 3 mana rock can't see play. So it just does that, and I guess that's fine. But it also sacks to draw how many cards at instant speed? In a control deck or something. A 3-color control deck where all of your lands are differently named duels, and maybe you've even got a fountain board in there somehow. You've worked a bunch of lands into your deck. And at that point, at the end of your opponent's turn, if you sacrifice this and draw 7 cards, do they not just scoop? Is this not, you haven't effectively won yet, but I guess you haven't technically won, but you have effectively won. That's how I should put that. The moment your opponent has an opening to actually sack this against you and they just draw 5 cards and what do you do? It's just, they need to find the opening to actually do it, sure, but I really like it. And I really like it in the oops all colorless deck, for what it's worth. That deck actually kind of needed a strong 3 mana rock, believe it or not. They kind of did. We didn't have a lot of good gravy on 3 mana rocks that the deck could really use to its advantage, but this it certainly can. That deck is ramping all the way, and once it has the 7 mana, let's go, baby. Let's just, in oops all colorless, all your lands have different names. You're playing a bunch of colorless lands, so draw 6. At the bottom of it, draw 6, dude. I kind of really like this, probably way more than I should, but I expect you're going to draw a buttload of cards, and even if you only draw 3, whatever, it's instant speed. I like it. And I know you might be thinking, dude, a control deck, you said? Yeah, maybe. You play this on turn 4, you still have 2 mana up for shields, counters, removals, whatever, so, it could work. Card's all right, man, I'm telling you, but let's move on to some cards I maybe haven't hyped up so much in my own head. Stuff like Survey Meccan and Memorial Team Leader. Now, Meccan is still kind of a cool card. This is 4 mana for a 1/3 robot. It's an artifact creature with flying and hexproof. You don't see that every day. It also has 10 mana A 10 mana activated ability that also requires you to sacrifice it. Another thing you don't see every day, so let's pay attention to what that does. It deals 3 damage to any target. Target player draws 3 cards and gains 3 life. This ability costs X less to activate, where X is the number of differently named lands that you control. So it's another one of these things that cares about the number of different lands you got. And if you can't tell by now, I think that that's actually a pretty slick little ability, because it won't take too long to where you have like 5 differently named lands, unless you're playing like all basics. Even if you have like 5 of each basic in your deck in a 2-color deck, you're probably going to have like 5 or 6 differently named lands. Like by turn 7, it's not too hard. So especially if you have like, you know, different kinds of, like, again, fountain ports and stuff like that. You've added a little spice to the mana base. It's not going to be too difficult, like, whatsoever, to have 5 differently named lands on turn 5, at which point you can activate this. It's pretty sick, you know? It's also available to activate at instant speed, so you can, like, block something of your opponent's and then just pop it off, you know? 3 damage to your face or 3 damage to that guy. I'll draw 3 cards. It's wild. That's actually a pretty insane little ability that it has, given, again, that you can activate it whenever you want to. And your opponent can't do too much to stop it actually happening, because stinking thing has hexproof. So, like, I don't know. It's not the best blocker in the world, and it does cost a lot of mana, but that activated ability, though, it's not bad at all. And I guess, because I always have to say this, Agatha's Soul Cauldron is still a card in Standard, so, you know, like, especially late in the game, once you have 7 differently named lands, all your creatures have this ability for 3 mana, and that could be pretty decent. It could be, at least. So, I don't know. I like him. I like the hexproof. There's some cool stuff about this guy for sure. Now, I won't gush as much about Memorial Team Leader as I did the last couple of cards, but he's pretty cool for, like, a limited aggressive deck. He's 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 4/3 Kavu soldier. During your turn, other creatures you control get +1/+0. He has warp for 1 and a red, so nice. You can warp him in and give all your dudes a little anthem, except for him, and that's relevant because he might have haste. You have a way to give your guys haste, and suddenly 2 mana for a 4-power dude that probably puts another like 3 or 4 power on the table as well is actually a ridiculously low investment. So, like, I think this guy is pretty powerful. Here I am gushing again, but again, he's kind of dependent on whether or not you have a way to give your creatures haste. And that means that, you know, now he's a turn 3 play, because you probably have to pay a mana to give all your creatures haste or something like that. Or you have to wait till later in the game to play him with haste. So he might not be as aggressive as I'd like him to be, but there are plenty of decks that can either accelerate their mana or have a couple of creatures on the table that can give other creatures haste. Like the Goblin that has, like, exhaust for a single red, all your creatures get haste till end of turn. He could work really well with this guy too. So I think there might be some amount of explosivity to the guy, right? So I don't want to completely write him off. I think that under the right circumstances, this dude could be, like, really good. We've still got Imodane's Recruiter in the format, and if you can somehow have the mana to play this guy and Recruiter in the same turn, then suddenly you've got a lot of power and toughness on the table all at once, just in these 2 guys. So again, there could be something there in Standard, but I mostly think this is like a really decent card for limited aggressive decks. Now next, let's look at Biomechan Engineer and Siege Ship Brewtender, both gold 2-drops with expensive activated abilities. Now, Engineer is the Simic one, a blue and a green for a 2/2 Insect Artificer. When it enters, you get a Lander token, and you can pay 8 mana to draw 2 cards and create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So 2 cards, that's cards, and you get some board presence at the same time. Like, all right, it's not so bad. It costs 8 mana, though, is the problem. I think the problem with that is that it costs 8 mana, but in any deck that's looking to get, like, infinite mana somehow, this could be a pretty good outlet for that mana, because it's a colorless outlet. You can basically draw your deck if that's what you're looking to do, and you can probably put enough people on the table at that point to win the game as well. So, like, maybe, again, as some sort of outlet in a big combo deck, this is somewhat efficient to get on the table in the first place, but you know, again, outside of some weird, like, Rube Goldberg, Pee Wee Herman's breakfast machine kind of combo, I don't really think this is going to see play, but I think it's neat. But we'll move on to Siege Ship Brewtender. You know, I really should point out, by the way, that just a 2-mana 2/2 that makes a Lander token, we're kind of talking already. So at least it's got that going for it. But I'll move on to Brewtender here. This is 2 mana, again, but Golgari this time. A black and a green for a 2/3 Insect Citizen. When it enters, mill 3 cards. All right, man. And you can pay 5 mana, 3 a black and a green, and sacrifice this guy to return target creature or spacecraft card from your yard to the battlefield at sorcery speed. Okay, cooking. actually cooking, man. I think that Valgavoss Faithful is still probably the better version of this effect in Standard. It only costs 1 mana to get on the table. It costs 4 mana to actually reanimate the guy, and that's just zombify. So, again, I think that Faithful is probably still going to see most of the play, but at the same time, man, this guy mills some cards when he comes into play. He's actually not a bad blocker. 2 mana, 2/3, sure, so stats are almost there. It's only an extra mana to reanimate something, and you even get the chance to reanimate a spacecraft if you'd rather do that, although maybe not, but still, I'd probably rather have a Valgavoth than any spacecraft we've seen so far, but still. At the same time, man, he's not a halfway bad, little reanimator dude, especially considering he mills the cards when he comes in. This is almost like a must remove, but and that's a removal spell they don't have when you do zombify the huge man, so, I think this is actually pretty slick. But next, let's check out Pulsar Squadron Ace and Sunstar Expansionist. Pulsar Squadron Ace. PSA over here. It's for 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 1/2 human pilot. When it enters, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a spacecraft card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So the only reason this is so far up here is because if there is a spacecraft deck, then this guy's going to go in it. You know what I mean? It's a good lady for that deck. I'm not sure that it's a good lady for most other decks. That said, there's enough spacecrafts at lower rarities and limited to where this is probably worth playing most of the time if you are like, a white deck or something that has some spacecraft in it, because if you don't hit, then it's actually got like kind of decent stats for a 2-drop. It's not going to embarrass you or anything, but if you do hit, then it's, a pretty decent form of card selection that might help you find one of your bombs. So I'd play it there given the right circumstances. But again, in Standard, if there's some sort of spacecraft deck, this will probably be a great card for a lot of purposes, but I'm not convinced there is one of those yet. So I'll move on to Sunstar Expansionist. 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/3 human knight. Bars. When this enters, if an opponent controls more lands than you, create a lander token. It also has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this guy gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So this is kind of a sneaky 2 mana 3/3 that creates a lander token like a good bit of the time. I'd say like 50% of the time this creates a lander token, kind of depending on whether or not you were on the play or on the draw. And this is one of those cards that in white can be good at this sometimes. It's part of the color pie that they don't touch on enough, I think. White can catch up in terms of lands and kind of make going second not such a huge deal. And in this case, it doesn't quite pay you a land the way like a Knight of the White Orchid or something would, but instead it pays you a resource that you might have other ways of using, right? It doesn't straight up give you ramp or anything, but it does give you an artifact token, and there's lots of ways to leverage that you can't leverage a land. So again, like pretty interesting card and an interesting way of using this part of like, the white color pie, I guess. To pull off a pretty cool little dude here. He kind of gives you 2 permanents when he comes into play, and he's got like a decent power toughness on most turns. And of course, if you can like pop a Fatal Passage or something, then he's a 4 power 2-drop on some turns, and I'm into that too. So just overall like a nice little guy. But the last couple of uncommons of the day are my favorite. We got Cavaron Harrier and Reroute Systems, which I particularly like, but Cavaron Harrier is... We've reached this level of power creep, I guess. I mean, long since have we invalidated the Savannah Lions, right? It hasn't been a good card in a while, but look at this guy. A single red mana for a 2/1 artifact creature who's also a robot soldier. They just throw a decent, relevant creature type on him there. Whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token that's tapped and attacking. Sacrifice the token at end of combat. Stop me if you've heard this. It's a Savannah Lions that can create a copy of itself. Which is particularly good in just about any aggro deck, which is where you're going to play your Savannah Lions, you know what I mean? If you just have a couple of extra mana laying around, and you probably do, especially on later-ish turns, then suddenly your 1-drop has provided 4 power for you. I mean, you paid a couple extra mana, but 4 power out of your 1-drop effectively is good, and it's kind of like giving it a version of Menace too, because it puts another copy of it on the table. You might have like an Impact Trimmers effect, giving you some sort of value for putting a card onto the table. It's another artifact token hitting the table, so anything that cares about artifacts either gets bigger or draws you cards or whatever it is that it does when an artifact comes into play. There's just so many cool things. Like Aristocrats decks could leverage this even because, you get a guy every few turns or every couple of turns. Especially in the late game, you basically get a guy every turn that they don't block this dude. And suddenly that guy dies at end of combat. So you get death triggers or whatever. There's a lot of ways to leverage the 2/2. And the only reason I'm freaking out so much is because the guy only cost 1 mana to get into play in the first place, and he has an aggressive stat line on top of that. This guy's like really, really efficient. And if he comes off the top of your deck, your aggro deck in the very late game, it's turn 6 and you haven't killed him yet, it's 2 sweepers in, but they're low on cards. Suddenly this guy looks pretty good. He can't attack the turn he comes into play unless you can engineer some haste, but then again, if you can, this guy plus Wild Ride plus 2 extra mana is 7 damage off the top of your library. Like there's ways to engineer this guy being like really, really gross. So I don't know, man. I've always liked the Savannah Lions, and they get increasingly more impressive as the sets go on, and this one is no different. This is a pretty crazy-looking Magic card to me. Again, as a 1-drop off the top of your library in an aggro deck, this threatens to do an awful lot of damage and really put some board presence on the table, which most 1-drops can't do. I just kind of like everything about this guy. But Reroute Systems, I said I particularly liked, and I just really yapped about that card for a second, so how much do I like this one? It must be a lot. A single white mana for an instant, choose 1. Target artifact or creature gains indestructible until end of turn, or deal 2 damage to target tapped creature. What? So it's a removal spell. It's a shock in a way that is also a protection spell. Am I being weird? Am I being not normal here? Is that insane? Does that register as absolutely bananas to anybody else? Right? Now these decks that want to play Sheltered by Ghosts and Ward creatures and stuff like that, these sort of Voltron, Bogle Z decks that we have access to in Standard that we haven't been playing in a while, I'll give you that much, but these decks that want to protect their creatures, now they have a protection spell that also is great against other aggro decks that don't have a lot of removal. The modality on this is crazy considering both modes are really, really good. 2 damage to a tapped creature at instant speed in the early game kills most important aggressive creatures you have to worry about, plus Deep Cavern Bats and stuff like that too. So just an excellent mode, all things considered, for the mana that you're paying for it. And freaking protect a guy, and artifacts too, by the way. So the Simulacrum Synthesizer deck could play this to both protect their synthesizers and their repurposing bays and their giant creatures if they wanted to, while also dealing damage to creatures in the early game to keep them off their back so they can actually resolve their synthesizer. It's a sick card there too. There's just so much you can do with this card. Both modes are not crazy, but for a single mana, both modes are definitely usable. The only question is do I kill that guy now, or do I want to, make sure I can keep this dude around? There's an interesting tension to it, but both halves are definitely spells you want to play over the course of most games of Magic. So I think it's a really, really good uncommon. But, I guess we got to get into the rares now. Boo. Let's look at stuff like Sunstar Chaplain first. We got another white 2-drop here. That's 3 or 4 in this one video. So 1 and a white for a 3/2 human cleric. Best stats so far. He wins. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. You can also pay 2 mana and remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control to tap target artifact or creature. You're not a Luminarch aspirant. You are certainly not that. You have to wait until the end step, although I guess this could give you value the turn it came into play. That's kind of neat. Especially with Station, I guess this works fairly well, or crewing vehicles, obviously this works fairly well, so you got that going for you, Chief, right? If you have mana creatures, then I guess this works with those as well, but still, 2 mana to probably, maybe, if you do it right, get a +1/+1 counter every turn is not a bad thing, but I could just play Innkeeper's Talent and get a +1/+1 counter every turn without having to do cartwheels or whatever you're trying to get me to do here. So, there's that. And this is also more removable than an Innkeeper's Talent, but Innkeeper's Talent doesn't swing for 3 by itself. I guess there's that, but still, you pay 2 mana and you come down a little bit on your size and you tap something down. And that could be okay. You can tap down spacecraft and stuff with it too. You can tap down big important artifacts that have tap activated abilities on certain parts of their turn or whatever. You tap it down during their upkeep and that might screw them up. So there's ways to use this, I guess, for defense if it comes to that. But I feel if you're doing that, then you're probably in trouble. But it's good to have a card that has you're in trouble mode. Tap down that big man. And I guess also you could sacrifice size from your team to tap down a couple of guys on your turn and get in. Maybe that's better than I'm trying to to think that it is. Who knows? But I'm trying to think that it is. That's a weird sentence. Maybe it's better than I think that it is. But altogether, I guess it's a pretty efficient package, and I do like that it's a cleric. I think maybe there's some stuff in clerics, but for the most part, I want to be more impressed by this than I am. But, come a month from now, it might be smashing my face in every other day, so I'll learn to respect it. It could be one of those. Now, next I'll look at Coral of the Void, which is probably not as good as the 2-drop we just looked at, but it's definitely cooler. I've never really seen a Magic card like this, and you don't get to say that every day, right? This is neat design. 4 mana, 3 and a black for an aura that enchants a creature you control. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. Nice. Void. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this aura unless a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped this turn. So this kind of looks like it's hard to sustain, right? But when you think about it, if your opponent is chump blocking either the thing with the aura on it or the thing that you're getting out of their graveyard, well then suddenly something definitely left the battlefield this turn, right? Again, with Void, it's whenever anything leaves the battlefield. It doesn't care which side the thing left the battlefield on. So your opponent's creatures get removed or something, well, suddenly that's voided. You've voided something. So that's pretty sick, Like if they do want to get in the way of the huge guy you just got out of their yard or the huge guy you got this on, and suddenly you get to keep the aura on and keep doing this. So it's actually pretty sick. It doesn't say that like you lose the creature at end of turn or anything like that, right? So that's pretty gross. You just get to keep getting their creatures. But I guess the worst case scenario with this is that the worst case is that you try to stick a 4 mana aura and they blow the dude that you're trying to put it away or on away for like 2 mana. They cast like a 2 mana removal spell on your 3-drop. You're trying to put a 4-drop enchantment on, and then suddenly they get 7 mana value on you or something. They get 5 mana value on you in that case. So yeah, again, like the problem with auras is that they're so easily kind of disrupted, but the real problem with this is that there's going to be cases where your opponent just doesn't have any creatures in their graveyard, and maybe they don't play that many creatures to begin with, so you just kind of got slim pickings in the first place, and then you paid 4 mana to really not kind of like do much. Right, so again, there's plenty of like fail cases with this card, but it looks like a fun aura to play, and maybe in Commander, like I don't even know if it's really great in that format, to be honest with you, not this time, but maybe in Commander, you got 3 different people to attack, so you can ensure somebody's going to have something juicy in their yard, and maybe on the right Commander, this is pretty good, like maybe on a Cotis that, has built-in indestructible or something. It's a little easier to stick your auras, and you're going to be attacking with them anyway, so again, maybe there's certain commanders that want to wear this thing. Like maybe it goes in Arietta the Charmed Apple or something like that. It seems like a pretty fun way to use the card, but ultimately I want to move on to something like Diadrine Synthesis Amalgam. This is Selesnya, green-white, and X for a 0/1 legendary artifact creature. It's a construct with trample. Diadrine enters with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of mana spent to cast it. Whenever you attack, you may remove a +1/+1 counter from each of 2 creatures you control. If you do, draw a card and create a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So if you do that, then you're not actually putting any more power and toughness onto the table. You're just getting a creature instead of the counters. And you're drawing a card, which is pretty gross. So I kind of like this guy just a little bit. He has to be in very dedicated +1/+1 counters decks. And you kind of have to spend a lot of mana on him for him to be okay. But I will say, if you spend 4 mana on him, then he gives you a 4/5 trample. And all right. Right? But at the same time, it's a whenever you attack trigger. So do you want to shrink your creatures when you attack so that you can get an untapped, not attacking 2/2? Some of the time you probably don't want to do that, so I'm not too sure, but my favorite thing about the dude is the scalability. If you pay 5 for him, he gives you a pretty decently statted creature, but you pay 7, 8, 9 for him, he gives you a huge power toughness, and we have learned in the past with stuff like, Hydroid Krasis for sure, but also, Stormcoil Serpent and other like X casting cost creatures, that if they're good enough, they certainly will see play, and the scalability is usually a big part of that. So I kind of like the dude, but I'm not like too convinced that he's great. But the next card I want to look at is kind of dangerous looking. This is Weft Walking, 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue for an enchantment. When it enters, if you cast it, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, and then draw 7 cards. Just you get Time Twister, but also the first spell each player casts during each of their turns may be cast without paying its mana cost. So That's just omniscience. I mean, you can't cast every spell without paying its mana cost, but, you know, what is it? Behold the Multiverse or something was in standard before omniscience, and people still tried to make that work, and that's kind of what this is in some ways, you know? Like, getting one spell each turn is pretty crazy, but do note that it says the first spell each player casts during each of their turns. So your opponent gets a free spell when you say go, and since you cast this for 6 mana, you're forced to cast it, by the way. You pay 6 mana for it. You probably say go. And now your opponent gets a free spell of their choice, which is really a lot. But, you know, this costs a good bit of mana, so maybe we're at the point in the game where the opponent's a little low on cards, so you're willing to take the chance of playing this and giving them a free shot in the mouth so that you can really get your plan going, because you got a fresh 7 when you played it, whereas they didn't. So maybe that's worth a lot. Time Twister tends to be worth a lot, so like maybe the card actually is worth playing. And in a deck that's already playing Omniscience, you know, you might as well play this to get a fresh 7 for free. Time Twister is a hell of a card again, so I could see all kinds of decks actually playing this, despite the fact that it just looks like a big, dumb, overcosted blue enchantment. There's a couple of those in every set. There's a couple of red ones in every set, but this one I actually think could have some real danger to it. It has a bad vibe. Let's move on to what might be the commander card of the day here. It's Mightform Harvester. 4 total mana, 2 and 2 green for a 4/4 insect druid with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, double the power of target creature you control until end of turn. You can warp this in too for 2 and a green, so that's kind of cute. You know, if you want to do that, there's plenty of reasons to do it, right? I especially like that this costs 3 mana, so on turn 4, you can play it with your 3 mana and then play your Fabled Passage and then go crazy, right? So note how this would work with something like Tifa, and know that it kind of just turns any creature that you control into a Tifa, but, you know, especially if you're stacking triggers with a Tifa, then she can get absolutely enormous, like really, really fast, so that's a cute little trick. On turn 3, like on curve with Tifa, but it also obviously works the same way with like Mossborn Hydra. You're doubling up to double the power triggers, you know, ordering them however you want. It really doesn't matter because suddenly they'll get freaking enormous. But like, it works with any creature you control, so, you know, leaving standard now, let's talk about Commander, where this will go in every landfall deck forever. They've been printing a lot of cards like that recently, but a lot of the landfall stuff they've been printing is like, I could take it or leave it in my landfall deck. This goes in, like for sure. This is in the landfall deck. It is relatively cheap to cast on both modes. It can be cast on curve, you know, with itself, which I think is kind of nice. You don't have to take a turn off without it, really. Not really. So there's a lot of cool stuff about this. I think it's a very unique landfall trigger you don't see every day, and it's a thing landfall decks want because there's so many landfall triggers that also, you know, boost power, whether it's +1/+1 counters or +1/+0 till end of turn or +3/+0 until end of turn. There's a lot of different like landfall triggers that make dudes enormous, like Gladiolus in Final Fantasy does it, right? The chocobos get larger whenever a landfall hits. So again, this works really well stacked with other landfall triggers to make your dudes just like righteously huge. So I like it. There's already kind of a green landfall deck sneaking up in standard, and like this could be a pretty good part of it. So cool card. But let's look at maybe the biggest card of the day. I'm not sure if it's a commander or a standard all-star, but it is pretty cool. This is Mimeon, the Right Hand. 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue for a 3/4 legendary jellyfish advisor. That's awesome. He has flying too, and you can look at the top card of your library anytime you want to. You may cast artifact spells from the top of your library. Artifacts you control have tap add blue. Spend this mana only to cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand. So now, not only do your artifacts tap to give you mana to play the stuff off the top of your library, but they also give you the mana to cast warped cards. They also give you the mana to cast adventure cards. Hey, you got any red card draw in the deck that exiles cards? You can play them till the end of your next turn or whatever. Well, it lets you, your artifacts now, tap to cast those cards as well. I think the goal with this, at least in a format like Standard, and even Commander, is to make sure that it nearly pays for itself the turn that you play it. You know, if you play this on turn 5 and you have a couple of artifacts out, well, and suddenly if you have a 2 or 3 drop artifact on top of your library, you can just play that. I really don't think it's too hard to make, you know, this thing give you some real value the turn it comes into play. And once you played an artifact off the top of your library, well, now suddenly that can tap for blue. So if you have enough low-ish cost artifacts or enough artifacts on the table the turn that you play this in the first place, then suddenly you might be able to, you know, run off 2, 3, 4 things off the top of your library, like you're playing Bolus's Citadel or something. And that's a pretty exciting proposition. You're going to hit a land. occasionally, that's for sure. But, maybe since you're playing artifacts anyway and you want to play a bunch of artifacts, you're playing Maze Mind Tome. So if Maze Mind Tome hasn't tapped for mana yet, you can tap down the Tome to scry away the land and then get back to work. So there's like a lot of ways. Maze Mind Tome's not the only one. There's a lot of ways to make sure that you can get the land off the top of your library or shuffle your library in some way. And then, again, go back to work and start casting stuff off the top. But, it's cool that this works with all kinds of other things, the casting spells out of exile and whatnot. Just really think it's cool. It's a little expensive to get on the table in the first place, but that never stopped anybody before. It really never did. I guess my only problem with this, in Commander, is that all your artifacts already tap for mana. All my Soul Ring taps for blue. I think I'll just keep tapping that for double. My Arcane Signet taps for blue. It already did. So thanks, I guess. You know what I mean? Unless you have a bunch of artifact tokens or something, then I'm not sure how much value it's actually going to give you. But even if you're casting a 5-drop artifact off the top of your library, it might be worth it that you can tap that down for blue, especially if it's not doing anything else anyway. So again, there's too much that I like about this in multiple formats. And yeah, I think given the right circumstances, this could absolutely be standard playable. Not only can your artifacts help you ramp into it, but your other artifacts can now tap for mana. Your Simulacrum Synthesizer can tap for mana now. And you know how easy it is to double and triple spell now that is a thing, that now that your Constructs can tap for mana, now that your Repurposing Bays can tap for mana. I keep bringing up that deck, and I'm not sure this is a perfect piece for it or anything, but I think that deck is pretty good, is all I'm saying. And this might be worth playing in it, but depending on what you're doing, I'm not sure this is super standard playable, but at the very least, it's a fun Commander brew around, and I like those. But that is Allski Kowalski. Just let me know down there in the comments, how you felt about the whole affair. Am I a little bit too hyped about some of the cards from today? I might be. Did I get anything wrong? You'll let me know. I don't have to tell you. And of course, any interactions or cards that you're excited for that I didn't really bring up, some of the coolest things they do, of course, let me know down there too. But apart from that, just do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Thumb button shaped like a thumb. You can also subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to 150K. We're getting there, but you can also check out the Patreon. $1 a month to support the channel and reward the hard work through spoiler season and beyond. You can also, for that $1 investment, vote on what decks we do around here. I hope this is the one that convinces you. Haven't done it yet, but I'll get you one day. It's just $1 a month. What else costs $1 a month? Nothing on the planet Earth. I am worth more than $1, but that's all I charge. So get into the Patreon link in the description and check out all the other preview videos we've done so far this season if you haven't yet. Do you have me on 2x speed? What does that sound like? Anyway, I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.